Well, good morning, everybody. As you watch this animation here from Blitzertongue showing some of the live lightning strikes this morning, let me give you a quick rundown of today's forecast video. I do want to cover the weekend severe weather and give you an update on where we are so far in the month of April in terms of both precipitation and severe weather reports. We're going to kind of use that to assess where this pattern's going. I think I don't know if the right term is kind of softening up a little bit. In other words, I don't see such pronounced deeper waves entering the west as we were seeing in the previous forecast. We need to see what that means going into the end of April and in the month of May. We will take a look at that longer term severe weather threat because, of course, this is kind of the peak of the severe weather season in spring. So we'll get it back into that. And then I want to look at the new long range data from the European, specifically the weeklies taking us through the month of May. Now, at the very end of this, stick around for it or just go there now if you want. I threw up my analogs last week again on Friday and talked about some of the new long-range guidance that just came out from the Climate Prediction Center. And I want to review very quickly, month by month, what some of those analogs look like. And I want to show you specifically for those of you in the Corn Belt what it did to yield. All right, because I got tons of Twitter messages and text about it, so we better just chat about it. So that's where we're going today. We're going to come back, though, right now to where the front currently sits. And it's driving itself through parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, all the way down to parts of Mississippi, into Louisiana and Texas, eastern Texas. Quite a bit of active thunderstorm activity this morning. Yesterday on satellite, it was quite impressive as this low finally emerged. So remember, this is the end of what had been about a 4-day stretch of very, very wet weather. This is the low that finally ejected, rode along that pressure trough, large cloud sheet out ahead of it. And then we can see where the severe weather kind of opened up yesterday. It was kind of neat, though. As I was walking through the very tail end of this animation, one thing did catch my eye, and that was what's right here on the back side of these storms that were going through eastern Texas just as the sun was setting. And it's interesting to note as I kind of zoom in there, just a couple things. One, deep storms still this morning moving out of this area. But take a look at this layer of dust and poor air quality. I don't know what's in it. But it was just neat to be able to see. And I also found it fascinating how clear from our geostationary satellites, the Dallas-Fort Worth, megalopolis, whatever you want to call it, this huge area here, still shows up from some of our lower resolution satellite data from, 23,000 miles away. So just kind of a fascinating bit of satellite imagery there to catch. But if we look back, let's kind of blow this up a little bit. This would have been the storm reports through last night. We go back to the day before. We can see where that boundary kind of stretched right in through here. And then remember, this system started off on the 17th and 18th. Here's the 18th severe weather reports, and here's the 17th when we watch those nasty storms come out of parts of Nebraska into Iowa. And remember, that was the one that kind of put these hail streaks down here. But I wanted to show you the last 7 days of hail because there's been quite a bit of it across the country and numerous reports of a very large hail from these storm systems that have come through. And that brings me to kind of a quick summary of where we've been on severe weather reports in the month of April. And it's interesting, when we get into the analog package at the end of this again, you do know that one of the years that's in my analog package is 2011. It had some similar ocean temperature structures. It had similar drought characteristics, especially anchored into the southwestern United States. And that's why it's made it into the analog package. Plus, it was also a year where we watched a La Nina event kind of fading as we went into our spring and summer months. But I want to show you it in a minute. But this is the 2025 reports. 210 tornadoes so far in the month of April. Almost 1,200 reports of severe wind and over 550 reports of large hail. So if you ever come to this page, it's pretty simple, spc.noaa.gov climo/summary. And it's what they call the rough sum page. So what I want to do is, though, take you back to 2011 to show you something that doesn't match. Okay? So if we're asking man, did 2011 spring look just like, or April look just like? No, it didn't. It doesn't look like now. I mean, it was the most active April on record, and it included this horrific severe weather outbreak, April 26th, 27th, and 28th, which is what gave us what is currently our largest single 24-hour time period outbreak of tornadoes, and it beat the event that happened back in the 70s that was here in parts of the eastern Corn Belt. So just incredible to see what April 2011 looked like. Okay, as we think about where we're going with severe weather, I just want to give you the quick 3-panel update. This is what I'm interested in. Now, if you note tomorrow on the day 2 outlook from the SPC, and then day 3, we are getting this kind of signal that we're getting our severe weather pretty far back, to the west. And that signals some sort of moisture recovery that we need to have a quick look at. And we'll talk about that more in a few seconds. Now, again, the current system as it goes through on radar here, just looking back last night into this morning, curls its way up into Wisconsin early this morning. Taking note of some of the showers we did have there, parts of the Pacific Northwest, including some needed rain getting into parts of Montana as well. But I wanted to give you kind of a glimpse as to what this looked like compared to the system that's been just rolling through this pressure trough that sat from Texas, up into parts of Missouri. Just in the last 72 hours, through 5 a.m. this morning, there were some places that picked up, 4 to 6 inches of rain, which is what we talked about happening. If you come down here and look, a couple of these areas right here that just crossed over the Red River, and then getting here into kind of the southwestern corner of Missouri, just numerous places here that are picking up more than 5 to 6 inches of rainfall. And just kind of getting a look at the the Midwest here. Just take note, we saw moisture getting into Iowa, but it was east-based, not west. You see, coming into southern Illinois, but not northern. And so in these states, I've heard from a lot of you over the weekend, like, what is it going to take for us to get some moisture here or back here? Because it certainly feels like other parts of some of these key Corn Belt states are getting everything they need, some of them too much, and others are missing out. So I'll show you the upcoming forecast in a few moments, but I did want to give you kind of a little bit more information on this. If we look down at 100 centimeters, okay, so this is 0 to 100 centimeters, so about 3 feet down. This is our current soil moisture percentile. Now remember, when you see this, it's the entire layer, and a percentile is like a rank, all right? So I get it. I mean, look at the state of Illinois. It's my home state, right? We're just split right on I-72. And then if you come over to Iowa, there's patches here. But then you get into parts of Nebraska, North and South Dakota, that subsurface soil moisture has not yet recovered. Then you come down here to parts of, the Mid-South, which just had, a tremendous amount of flooding early in the year, early in the month. And then we see that the recent event hit this side, getting over into southern Illinois, Missouri, back into Oklahoma, Arkansas. And it just tells you that everywhere in this area is just feeding into the Mississippi, which is currently at moderate flood stage here. And just as a reminder, you go back to the beginning of April. So in 3 weeks' time, the rivers come up 30 feet in depth as you look at it here at Memphis. But that's where all that water's collecting. Now, it'll be interesting as the statistics from yesterday get tossed into this graphic, because this only goes to 7 a.m. But when I look at this, I do notice a couple of things. We have been drier at times because of the presence of the big subtropical ridging over Florida. This is fed into this constant trough of pressure, low pressure from Texas all the way to the eastern Corn Belt that has at times brought some moisture into the Northeast. North of that, though, we can find more pockets of dryness. In the West, it's common for this time of year for us to just begin our drier season. So I don't often look at these statistics in the same way that I look at them elsewhere across the United States, West versus, the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. But I wanted to give you just kind of the latest and point out again that in terms of Aprils, we've got right now for most of Kentucky a top 2 or the wettest start to April on record. And we have more precipitation coming into this area. But I wanted to take you back and just look at some places here that are drier. So I'm going to go to Kearney, Nebraska. I was just there a couple weeks ago. So I pulled up their precipitation time series. So it's kind of right on I-80, south central Nebraska. And this is where they sit, 1.9 inches on the year. Average would be closer to 4.5, almost 5. And the only year that had a drier start would be, 2022. So I can kind of toggle it on and off here. Now, what was interesting about 2022 is after this point, they just brought on steady rain that matched their historical slope. And also, remember, in late May of 2022, early May 12th, was it somewhere in here? This is when they had this massive derecho event that wiped through the eastern side of Nebraska as well. But I just want to show you that there are pockets in through here. When you see this map, we need to take it quite seriously with the dryness that is still deep in the soil as you look at it here on just a time series of the last few years and this year. Okay, from there, though, this is what we've got. And as we look at the pattern over the next 7 days, I've got some parts of Nebraska that are, several inches behind, trying to pick up a little bit of the pace. And we do see more wet weather coming into the central and southern plains. Now, how far back the west this gets, that's going to be something that's important. And also, do these storm systems start and then just kind of fade as they move in this direction? Why do we have so much wet weather here that doesn't translate east? And then where is this southeastern ridge? I mean, all of those questions I think are very important to the pattern if you are east of the Rocky Mountains here. Now, west of the Rocky Mountains, I've just noticed something about the Pacific jet stream flow. We are a bit split. There is a subtropical branch, but more of the momentum in the jet stream is pretty far to the north. This is like 50 degrees north latitude. We just kind of have a large region in through here where there's not much going on. The flow is relatively, weak and split. And so this is what seems to be influencing the western U.S., precipitation patterns. We'll get into that more in a moment. But take a look at the high that's just sitting off the coast of Florida. This is the thing that I think is going to continue to make pockets of the southeast on the drier side of average. Now, in 2011, take this thing, expand it, move it right over to Bermuda. And so what was going on was when it was sitting here, we were just pumping in the moisture. The subtropical jet was screaming over the top of it. The polar jet came right out of this and dove into the United States. So much different than what you've got here, just ripping off severe weather in the southeast. Since we brought up that analog year, I at least thought I would show you that. Okay, so I meant the pattern's a little softer. In other words, I don't see such dramatic upstream to the United States trough ridge events. So over the next 15 days, when the AI model kind of just averages it, most of the action is here in the North Atlantic. And what I'm talking about is there seems to be this ridge feature here and this trough that's south of Greenland and Iceland, and then another ridge there. So the pattern is highly amplified from the North Atlantic through northern Europe into Russia. But then you come over the Pacific, all right, there's some troughing here and troughing there, but there's kind of a sense that the ridging over the west is going to push the pattern north. I think that's what's going on right now. In other words, we're going to take the typical jet stream momentum and just shove it a few degrees north in latitude. And you say, well, what do you make of this, Eric? Well, I don't look at this and see, just repeated massive severe weather outbreaks. We just went through that, right? That was the story. What I see in this is I think you'd find the jet living way up here more often than anything. And this is mild. Now, there's a reason why we color the ridges red, because they're symptomatic of mild conditions. The trough's blue, they're wet and cold. So I think this is more about a temperature discussion than anything else. Now, where we just came from in the month of April, do you see the differences here? Look, trough, large ridge here, trough there, ridging, and we zipped around that. But this fed, that was the Bermuda high feeding this, and there's little cutoff lows that came here and followed that track. So this is where we've been. And I just think the pattern is fallen apart in the Pacific temporarily. And that just happens. And is it predictable long range? No. That's why we always watch the 2-week forecast to understand where this is going to go. But as I mentioned, it is a setup that just tends to bring in these more mild conditions. And we're going to dig into this in a few minutes. So as I look at it, the frost that's in Nebraska, that's this morning. Okay, same thing for parts of South Dakota. This is happening now. Willamette Valley, that frost is happening now. And as you look, as I show you this forecast and temperatures, we're going to really just take away the colder risks in this pattern, going forward here pretty soon. Now, we'll come back to that in a second. I first want to just get you an idea, though, that we still have moisture in this pattern, even though I told you the overall dynamics of it are not as pronounced and deep and long wave-like. But over the next 10 days, here's our probability of getting another inch. Now, understand, this does include, this is a 0-0 run, so this actually includes some of last night's rain that went through here. But over the next 10 days, in red, that's a 90 to 100% chance of getting another inch. Now, I bet I got a new model run in. Oh, I didn't. Wow, I beat it. Take a look at these numbers, though. This is the probability of 2 inches. And look at this. And there's even some spots over here in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that has a shot at 4, a better shot. But there's a very wet corridor that's sitting into this region, okay? Now, on the drier side of it, let's take it down to who's staying under a 1/2 inch. And now you can start to see the influence of that ridge. So this is something to watch. Do we start seeing drier risks come into this area? And then come back into Mexico and the southwestern United States, still anchored on our drought monitor. In fact, if I drop you down to who has a high probability of staying under a 1/10 of an inch, these subtropical highs are really dominating. And here's one, and here's another. Now, you know that last fall we watched Mexico go into one of its driest, 6-month stretches from last summer into last fall, and even throughout winter it was maintained. I just want to show you that the current drought severity index for Mexico looks like this. Now, Central America has picked up more moisture, but you can find, since 1981, some extremely dry areas down here in Mexico, which just continues to get us thinking about where that drought risk it might come from or spread from later on this year. Because I don't expect this to stay like this through the heart of summer. And I'll make that case again in a few minutes. So this might migrate or move somewhere. Okay, so that brings us to our all hazards map. We do have the frost risk here, mainly this morning. There it is again, Willamette Valley, parts of the Columbia Basin. A red flag warning here. This is all dealing with flooding from the recent rains that just came through. And as we look at it, one of the things I want to just talk about right away is going to be the winds. So by tomorrow, we are going to watch again. One system curls up today, giving us the stronger winds here. But again, a kind of a push at stronger winds starting tomorrow, where we could get some gusts back over 50 miles an hour here. Just wanted to kind of bring that up from the high-res NAM. Let's flip this over, though, to a precipitation intensity and type forecast. So watch out for some snow here as we work our way through this morning into the midday. The front starts to push into the northeast, bringing some rain. A little weak system on the back side of this. Spread some rain throughout parts of North Dakota. Love every bit of this. We need it. Same thing for central Minnesota. Our front kind of stalls here. Doesn't get into the southeast because of the presence of the southeast ridge. And then as we go a bit farther, this is into Tuesday night, getting into Wednesday, we're starting to note some storm activity maybe coming back into the, not just the southern plains and central plains, but the western plains as well. We need to get in there and kind of have a good look at what that could look like. Now, I'm going to be honest, the models have really split in their skills lately. Again, I want to thank Dr. Ryan Maui for letting me use this graphic, but take a look. The GFS has fallen off a cliff here with its northern hemisphere anomaly correlation. In other words, how well is it doing at predicting the position of troughs and ridges across the northern hemisphere? And the European there's a huge separation here. But something to think about. In fact, let's just go back here. I'm going to go home. I want to go, let's just choose a model. Let's go to the ECMWF since it's performing better. CONUS, and I'm interested mainly in dew point. Okay, so knowing that the European model is doing better, watch this. As I play this forward, I'll tell you what I'm watching. I'm watching this. This is our North American dry line. It's where the desert southwest air, the air that comes off of the Rocky Mountains, which descends adiabatically, warms and dries. It's where it meets the moisture that comes from the Gulf. All right, that's a very simple definition of it, but that's not the whole thing. What I'm looking for is this. I mean, that's Tuesday, 7 8. Look how far that tried to wiggle its way back to the west. And to get 55-degree dew points by Wednesday into Amarillo, hey, look at that. This is what's helping get this region better chances of storms. And I'm all the way up to Saturday. That is a pretty far west progression of the dry line. So here we go. Let's see what this might be able to do. I'm going to flip over to a GFS versus European solution. We're going to play this forward. So this is going through today. There's a little clipper we mentioned that follows it, some snow in southern Canada. And then by Wednesday, that is when we start to see the dew points recover. And by Wednesday night, we're talking about, what would that be? That'd be the second day of storms here, because the first one's coming on Tuesday. As we play forward from there, this is Thursday. Look at this mess. I mean, it's just raining. And we get into Friday. And then Saturday, wow, look at that. That is a westward retreat of the dry line by next Saturday. And I just keep seeing the helpful effect of some sort of ridging either here or here. I don't care. There's ridging east. It's not good here for the moisture, but we're opening this up and just getting us out there a full week and beyond. boy, the pattern is trying to light things up. Now, the models differ from their solutions by next Tuesday. But we I don't know, we have something to think about here. You saw the precipitation probability graphics, right? We've looked through this, and we can see, there's the new model run. Darn it, I thought I beat it this morning. But you saw this next 10 days. I just think it's what we're kind of witnessing here in the models. Okay, so how about European model solutions, since it's the better performing? This is through Friday, getting into next Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And a 10-day, outlook has got this area, parts of Iowa too, just really picking up on moisture. I don't know what Missouri did to this, but they're missing out. But you've got dry here, and in the middle, we're putting the squeeze on the atmosphere. And that's just one spot to analyze. I mean, got other places we need to look at. In fact, some of that's going to be snow I just highlighted. So take a look coming out of southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. This is happening right now, going through, clipping northern Wisconsin, Lake Superior into Ontario. And, we got another shot at some snow coming down the Front Range, too, in this pattern. So thinking all of that through, where does it end up 10 days from now globally? Do I still see some of those interesting features? Yeah, there's still a trough here, ridge. There's that trough over Russia. But this trough, for weeks, we saw it kind of closer here. And so the pattern is, I don't know, if I looked at this and I started tracing these lines, I'm a bit confused on how the models are teasing out this wetter pattern into week 2, unless it's just maybe at the very beginning of week 2. The AI doesn't really have it as much, but certainly the European and the GFS ensemble do. So does our government. So I mentioned earlier that the pattern's kind of backing off a little bit. And I want to show you the latest update from NIU. This, again, from Victor Gassini, his work. You've got the GFS week 2 forecast, so there's the storm activity there. You then have down here the CFSV2. Again, that's the week 2. So we kind of saw this, right? We know that over the next 10 days, we're going to keep this area open. But then the week 3 backs it off, but I still continue to see these storm risks getting pretty far to the west. I want to watch that carefully because there's been this concern about, drought and where it's going to come from, what it's going to look like. And we've made a kind of a big stink about the drought that's been in the southwest plains over time. So just take a look at it here, and let's add it to the newest update from the CPC. So their forecast, sorry about that. There we go. Their forecast for week 3, week 4 keeps this active, mainly because of a southeast ridge. I look at this and I'm a bit skeptical. Now I'm going to tell you why. If I were going to see this whole area just stay so wet, and I'm talking about getting this all the way back on the plains, we're going to have to talk about a pretty dominant southeast ridge. And we're going to have to talk about short waves just coming over the mountains. That is climatologically consistent with what happens this time of year, but I have to throw some question marks in here, and here's a couple reasons why. One, sorry about that, the European model for the month of May, it just really went after a drier look in this area. And you can see some similarities between it and the extended GFS. But I still think the European model is struggling with finding a dominant factor dynamically to force it, like the MJO's collapse, the lack of a more dominant signal. But can I back up my reasoning for why I think that this, let's go back to it, might be a bit generous. Now we know the next 10 days is going to look like this. That gets us, into May. I just don't know that it lasts into the middle of May. Now this is just my thoughts this morning as I watched the trends all weekend, but here's maybe where I'm getting some of this information. All right. I always look at this every day, whether I show it to you or not. It is the vertical and zonal integral of total atmospheric angular momentum. Now you're going, all right, what the heck? All right, see this in through here? That would be from 15 to 30 degrees north. And this would be on the negative side, which means that during the stretch of late January through early March, which you remember we got very cold during this time, we had very, very weak subtropical jet stream flow. I barked about it every day, like, where's the subtropical jet? Where's this? So what did we do? We saw stronger winds to the north of that, and this is what drove in multiple cold air outbreaks. Then it ended literally when Commodity Classic started. And we had system after system after system, and we've been seeing those all the way up until about now. But recently, we've built this back in. Now, in winter, that gave us a cold signal, and that's not what I'm talking about here. But this lack of momentum in this area seems to be telling me that the jet stream flow is just shifting in its position in the northern hemisphere. Okay, what do we do with that? It looks something like this. This is just, again, Victor's sight. I see lower momentum here and higher there. Now, what am I looking at? The dashed line is average, and the solid line is today. So it's below there and above here. Now, where is that? That is 30 degrees north. This is 50 to 60 degrees north. Or you can look at it like this. We're looking at atmospheric angular momentum. It is low at 30 degrees north and high at 55. So if I still kept your attention, what I'm seeing here comes back to where we started. This northward movement of the jet. In spring, that should actually signal some mild conditions, but weaker flow, which is why I'm beginning to think that maybe seeing the wetter weather there might be real, and we're just going to watch these little subtle features come out here that the models are not going to be able to pick up on. And that's kind of I got to work with something today. And some days the atmosphere just gives you everything you want, and it's all just crystal clear, and you feel clairvoyant. And other days you're like, all right, I got to go searching for what's going on here, and I'm searching right now. And that's what I think I'm seeing overall. So what about these temperatures, right? If I'm telling you that there's this mild setup, what does that mean? Well, first of all, the frosty temperatures early this morning here in Nebraska are going to get blown out of the water by 76 degrees in Lincoln by this afternoon. We then go into tomorrow, a little bit of cooler weather across the northern tier of the U.S., but you saw this. There's snow there coming in, right? We have that little clipper that's behind this. That's Tuesday's highs. There's Wednesday, Thursday, a bit cooler air sags into the northern plains. This is Friday. This dips down here, getting into Saturday and Sunday when the west drops off in its temperatures. But if you look at the matrix here, look at this. Day 0 through 5, 5 through 10, 10 through 15, European, GFS ensemble, AI. I mean, the ensembles are just generous with the warmth. They just got it. Plenty of warm conditions. So let's just have that frost discussion again. This is the European ensemble. So there's 51 model simulations in this, and we're using them all to give us a probability of who might see a temperature below 32 Fahrenheit. Now remember, 32 is just a cutoff. Really, we have to be looking around 35 to know if we could hit it. But just look at the pattern. This is tomorrow morning. We already looked at this morning. Here's tomorrow morning. That is Wednesday morning. So watch the cool air sink across the northern tier of the U.S. There it is. That's Thursday morning. So we're going, what is the white again? The white is right now the model having a 0 to 10% chance of having a temperature below 32 Fahrenheit. And what I'm watching for is how far to the north do these colors retreat. So that's Thursday. There's Friday morning, northern tier of the U.S., not uncommon. Saturday morning, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm looking for anything that could drive cold air in, and the models are not giving it to me. That's out to May 6th. So the question becomes, if you're trying to actively plant a crop, is the window open in terms of rainfall, not necessarily soil temps or what's going on with the atmosphere temps. I just don't see. I mean, for folks that have been asking about these planting windows because their insurance dates just passed here, I don't know. I don't see a frost coming in the near term. Now, where have the temperatures been changing? Globally, right off the coast of South America, which is interesting because if you remember in my analog years, okay, what did we talk about? We had cooler water that extended here, fading La Nina. We saw some cooler water there, but we got really cold here with warm water there, and the cold water extended back like this. No signal from the Indian Ocean. Remember that discussion last Friday? This kind of helps with it a little bit. So let me just do this with you again. What happened in April in terms of precipitation for those years that we've picked out, 96, 99, 06, 08, 11, 12, 17? It looked like this, and we've already seen that. We know that the southeast ridge has been around, and we're worried about this region going a bit drier. We've actually had some decent moisture getting into the west. Remember the statistics, it wasn't overly dry. And maybe it doesn't line up perfectly with Texas, but April composite of those years doesn't look too far off from this. Too far off, right? So let's come back to it here again. Boy, where was that? Nope, there it is. So what happened in May in those years? This was the precipitation pattern in May. So drier in these colors, wetter in those. June. And then this was July. Now, just to reiterate, we saw high pressure build in here. There was a larger ridge in the flow over the Montana, but the surface high was there. So the flow came around like that. So we had storms that cascaded through here. And then we had an active early onset to the southwest monsoon. That's what we talked about on Friday. But just to show you something, July got pretty hot at times. But remember, in this analysis, I've got 2 hot years, 11 and 12. Doesn't mean if I take them out that this goes away. It just means that it's important to understand that we do have the granddaddy in here as well, not 2012. But I want to show you something. I got asked a lot, Corn Belt guys were asking about this over the weekend. So I pulled this out of a talk I've been giving that looks at 1960 to present. I've just labeled all of the big weather events that tended to drive our yields off trend. So what's interesting is if you look at the better weather years, you'd really actually find that our yield trend should be somewhere way up here. But we have weather. We have abiotic stress. So here we go. 1996. Well, that was 1996, one of my years. 97, 98, 99. Okay. What was the next one? 2006. So this is 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 was incredible for growing corn. But then we have 11 and 12, which are in the analog package. So then the other one is 17, which is here. So I've kind of highlighted and circled my analog years for corn yield. So I do this because I just want to be careful that when I show you a map that's like, hey, look, it's going to be hot in July, that we just don't yet blow this out of proportion. Because while I do think, I mean, you saw it with me last week. I showed you the, I have it on ag weather. I showed you this graph, which was the July, August, September precipitation anomalies from the CPC, and they were trying to just anchor west of the Mississippi, very dry conditions. That we have to understand that this is just it's a pattern. We're not necessarily fully understanding the magnitude of this yet. So what do we need to watch? Well, this is why I brought you back to this. I don't even know where I put it now, but the ocean temperatures. I'm watching carefully right here and right here. And if the atmosphere loses momentum in the next 8 weeks, you'll start to get cold water that emerges here and stays there. And that's an indication that we're going to have West Coast troughing going into summer and central U.S. ridging. So that's about the only lead indicator I can give you other than this. That's all we have, to be honest with you. When you look statistically at what weather variables have long-range, statistically significant correlation with predicting the next season, for summer, this is a summer discussion, it's ocean temperatures and soil moisture. That's it, okay? So I'm going to finish with one last thing, and that is just a quick international outlook, just to kind of bring you up to speed on a couple of things. There's our wet weather we just talked about here. Most of Brazil is wet as well. We're dry in southern Brazil, dry in Argentina, but we've been kind of watching that. Dry south of the Yangtze, North China Plain, Manchurian Plain near normal, little drier signal. North of the Black Sea in Ukraine's drier, but wet all around it. So we're just kind of getting an idea of what's going on in spring around the rest of the world here over the next 10 days. But I'm going to stop it here and tell you all have a good day, and I'll talk again soon. Thanks.